Have you ever let a piece of fruit grow moldy in your refrigerator simply because you forgot it was there? Or have you ever thrown away a can of soup because it was past the best by date stamped on the label? Did you ever wonder what happens to all the produce in the supermarket that goes unsold, or what your favorite restaurant does with all the leftovers at the end of the day? It goes to waste. Along with 40% of the food in the United States that ends up in a landfill or is left to rot in the field. Many in the world don't get to have a warm meal on their table. So why do we take for granted and waste the leftover food we have? There are several ways to prevent any further food wasting, so why not exercise these options? We know immense quantities of food go to waste, but do we know why it happens or what it's costing us? Between 33 to 50% of all food produced globally is never eaten. And the value of this wasted food is over $1 trillion. To put that into perspective, in the USA, food waste represents 1.3% of the total gross domestic product. Food waste is a massive market inefficiency, the kind of which does not persist in other industries. While food loss happens mainly at the production stage due to insufficient skills, natural calamities, lack of proper infrastructure, and poor practices, food waste occurs when edible food is intentionally discarded by consumers after they fail to plan their meals properly and store food till it spoils or goes past the expiry date. At times, food waste can also happen due to oversupply in markets. Retailers also tend to reject a lot of food because it doesn't conform to their quality and aesthetic standards. A 2013 FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations report, which was the first study to analyze the impacts of global food wastage on the environment, says that nearly 1/3 of all food produced in the world for human consumption does not find its way to our tables. It's hard to believe that in a country where 40 million people face hunger every day, so much food could go uneaten. Yet this is precisely what is happening, and we're all partially to blame. Perfectly good food is being wasted at every level of the supply chain, on the farm, during distribution, at the store, and in our homes. Food wasting occurs because of many reasons, but one of which is a leading cause is household wasting. Households are responsible for the largest portion of all food waste. ReFed estimates that U.S. households waste 76 billion pounds of food per year. Approximately 40 to 50% of food waste, including 51 to 63% of seafood waste, happens at the level of the consumer. In the US, an average person wastes 238 pounds of food per year, 21% of the food they buy, costing them $1,800 per year. In terms of total mass, fresh fruits and vegetables account for the largest losses at the consumer level. 90% of fruits and 22% of vegetable, followed by dairy, 20%, meat, 21%, and seafood, 31%. It's easy for many people to dismiss food waste as someone else's problem and say, I don't waste any food, or to focus solely on the more visibly shocking examples of waste. However, the reality is that in the developed world, more than 50% of food waste takes place in our homes. In contrast, less than 2% of food waste takes place at the retail store level. Through supermarket practices are directly responsible for much food waste elsewhere in the supply chain. In addition to the enormous humanitarian cost and the leading cause of food wasting, our food waste epidemic is also an economic and environmental catastrophe. Food waste is really, really bad for the environment. It takes a landmass larger than China to grow the food each year that is ultimately never eaten. Land that has been deforested, species that have been driven to extinction, indigenous populations that have been moved, soil that has been degraded, all to produce food that we then just throw away. In addition, food that is never eaten accounts for 25% of all freshwater consumption globally. Not only are all the resources that went into creating the uneaten food wasted, like land, water, labor, energy, manufacturing, packaging, etc., but when food waste goes to landfill, which is where the vast majority of it ends up, it decomposes without access to oxygen and creates methane, which is 23 times more deadly than carbon dioxide. Now that we know why food waste occurs, its effects, and the leading cause, how do we fix it? To stop food waste, changes have to be brought in at every stage of the process, from farmers and food processors to supermarkets and individual customers. As a first step, priority should be given to balancing production with demand. This essentially translates to lesser use of natural resources to produce food which is not needed. Secondly, more effort should go into developing better food harvesting, storing, processing, and distributing processes. If oversupply happens, steps should be taken to redistribute the food or to divert it to the people who are in need. Though the UN says that food production will have to increase by more than half to meet the demands of the growing population by 2050, the actual increase would be much lesser if food waste was reduced. Consumers should also try to buy food in accordance with a meal plan, so that they don't end up wasting edible food. Food may be cheaper when you purchase in bulk, but in reality, you are not really saving money when all you are doing is chucking it in the bin at the end of the week. If the food still ends up unfit for human consumption, it can be used for feeding livestock, saving precious resources that would have otherwise been used for producing commercial feed. If the food cannot be reused at all, then we should at least try to recycle it in a responsible manner instead of sending it to the landfills where it continues to rot. Hopefully, now that you know the downsides of food wastage and some ways to prevent it, you will exercise these methods. America has a food problem. We buy too much food, we consume too much food, we discard too much food, and we discard it in irresponsible ways. Like most issues, our food waste problem has evolved over time. We've gone from a country that was built on agriculture to one where our relationship to food is purely transactional. Most people buy what is quick and convenient and then toss what they don't want in the trash. The scale of the problem, however, necessitates much broader action. That means we must encourage our fellow consumers, the food industry, businesses, schools, and elected officials to make reducing food waste a priority. It's important to take care of our bodies, but it is vital to take care of our planet.